Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 44th Annual Atlanta Film Festival and the 10th anniversary of the Creative Conference. This panel today is about testing in film production. Unfortunately, Trish Taylor wasn't able to join us. She had a family emergency, but Gabrielle Pickle, or Gabby, or G as everyone calls her, is here to tell us what she knows. I want to start by saying we are not medical professionals. I have no idea what I'm talking about when it comes to testing, but Gabby has just done 2 back-to-back shoots where she had to learn all of this stuff. But this stuff is a moving target. Every week, every couple of days, we learn something new. So what she tells you now may be different a week, 2 months, 3 months from now, but we at least want to share with you what we know, how it feels to be on set, what we know about testing, the different kinds of tests. And then, we may, if we run short on time talking about testing, although I'm sure there's a lot to talk about, we'll talk about some of the things on set that she's seeing as well. So welcome, Gabby. Thank you.
Thank you for having me very much.
Absolutely. So start by telling me, you're a producer, a production manager, you work in indie world, you work in commercial world. How did you get this knowledge? Did you take some of these COVID certifications? And if so, which ones would you recommend?
Well, this started many, many months ago because I ran out of things to watch on Netflix. So I decided to become an expert on all things COVID, and called up my team, coordinator, UPM, locations managers, like, we need to figure this out. The studios are all trying, the unions are trying, but they're going to take months, and we just need to learn everything we can. So the first certification that was available was OSHA, and they came out with kind of a general touch contact tracing, like understanding your hottest touch points type thing. And that's free. They have 2 different certifications through OSHA, and if you Google it, you'll find them. So we did that probably back in May. And kind of started this process. We also were very much researching kind of general contact tracing, and the Mayo Clinic offers a course in contact tracing that you can sign up for free. It gives them data, and you get to learn about how it works. And they're trying to contact trace across the entire United States. So that's a great thing to do because it helps them have that information. So we did that in May. And white paper started coming out in June, and really tried to focus on, how it was going to look for productions. Recently, I did the health education services training, which is a fee, not a big fee, but that's one of the standards they're looking for COVID compliance officers. And it's really focused on that as a job, and like details from like signage, how to put tape down, how to set up catering, and like X out chairs, and like the exact measurements that you need to focus on, what needs to happen every morning, midday, and evening. And there's a lot of different information out there right now. There's just so much. And kind of my thought was, I'll learn everything I can. And even if I'm doing something that's proven later to not work, at least we're trying to do everything possible. And so, CDC has changed its recommendations. Different people have come out with like, oh, well, it doesn't stay on surfaces very long. We're still going to clean surfaces, like we're going to do everything possible. And so I'm kind of taking all of these different courses, compiling them together, and then just taking whatever's like the most extreme. And that's what we're going to do, because we're moving from production to production and have a very high contact rate. In a sense, like, yes, we're trying to stay 6 feet apart, and we're wearing masks, and we're doing all of the guidelines, but like when you get a group of 50 plus people together and then they leave and go work with a different group of 50 plus people, like those are problematic situations. So we have to mitigate it in every way we possibly can. Another certification that I took is ServeSafe, which is the restaurant industry has a COVID specific training, and it took me maybe an hour to do, but specifically for talking with our caterers about touch points, about drop-off catering, about how we were going to plan to do meals, to do crafty and whatnot. That became very, very important to just like the takeout course. I think everyone in the film industry should do. It's like 15, 20 minutes and it's free. The actual certification for ServeSafe is like a couple $100s. And I don't know how much that's needed for anybody other than like a COVID compliance officer to be able to have those conversations with those two departments. But just taking the quick COVID it's not a certification, you get a certificate, and it tells that you've watched the video and passed the test. But it's very helpful when it comes, even if I was doing a short film, I would watch it, because it's all about how you protect people's food from anybody that's handling it throughout the line. And it's good.
Yeah, that's great. So I probably shouldn't ask this question, but I like to cause trouble. I know that there are some other courses out there in Georgia. I want to say see now maybe my brain shutting down is me not supposed to ask the question, but I think there's some other Georgia certifications that are done at some of the schools. How do you feel about those?
I mean, if you
I think take everything, and they're free.
I think take everything, as long as, you know, you can afford it or whatever. I know the health education services one is what most people in like studios are looking for, along with like a medical background and you know, like they have this extensive list. I think every single certification you can get, you should, honestly, because it keeps it fresh in your mind. And who knows, people may have a different way of cleaning tables or handling something that you're like, oh, I never thought of that before. So take them all. Just Google it, take them all.
Do you think this is something that just the COVID compliance officer should take, or producers or production managers, locations, those kind of people? Or do you think this is, I've told all of the PAs in the PA Academy, take all of these courses, because even if you don't end up being hired by a company who's doing cleaning stuff, because not every medical person is going to be cleaning, but it feels like, you know, if you're the first AD, or you're the set deck, or your props, or an AC, all of these courses are helpful to you as well, because then you're going to understand the process and how things work, and you can adapt your behavior too.
Absolutely. I would say in my circles and the people that I typically hire, I've seen probably 60 to 70% of people posting on Facebook, I do not plan to be in charge of COVID compliance, but because I'm a department head or because of this, I am taking these courses so that I understand. Because even as a COVID compliance officer, unless you've worked in art or grip, you're not going to understand contact tracing and potential contamination issues for your department. You're going to have general practices, you're going to have people practices, but you're not going to know that, oh, we should be wiping down our C-stands like every hour. Or, you know, now one of the things I just rented from PC&E, and they're quarantining all gear for 3 days, which means with scheduling, now I need to make sure my grip and electrics are not available immediately after the shoot, but 3 days after, to come back and check everything in. And I think it's just very important for everyone to be as educated as possible. And honestly, I'm more likely to hire a PA that has those certifications on their resume, because it shows that they care, and then they're also going to be committed to keeping everybody safe.
Yeah. And that's exactly what I keep telling other people I run into is, you know, we're watching we see each other, we see people's social media pages. And if you're a mask hole or a COVIDiot, the chances of you coming on set are very slim. I mean, we're paying attention to those people who are off, you know, showing pictures at the club or inside a restaurant, because those things do matter. I think people need to understand that it's not just about you. What if you get one person sick on a crew? Well, what if you get everybody sick on a crew? That doesn't just shut down that show. That could shut down every show in Georgia, in California, anywhere. You know, it could shut our entire industry across the US down because of the concern that something could happen to an actor or someone else. No matter how safe anybody is, it's all about perception. So I think these things are
absolutely important. And I mean, SAG is watching that very closely, and making sure that their actors are safe, and not just with testing, but also, you know, if there's a shutdown here, looking over there to see where they're going, where they're coming from, what are the potential contaminations? Is it the same producer again? You know, like it's definitely a concern, and all eyes are on film right now, because we're an industry of people that was completely out of work for 6 months. now that we're getting back to work, even more so than like waiters and whatnot, we're back to work pretty much en masse. Like everybody's trying to go and get content out by the end of the year. The whole world is watching us to see if we can pull this off. Like, can we actually prove that following the CDC's guidelines, you know, wearing masks, committing to keep each other safe, sanitizing everything, staying as distant as possible, putting up barriers wherever possible, like, does this work? Can we contain it?
Yeah.
I would say, you know, we've seen mixed results in Georgia and in the US. There's definitely shutdowns that are happening. And I think that that's just part of the experience. I don't think anybody's going to be perfect. You know, Tyler Perry's done an incredible job, but even they had a couple people that were positive on their first test and had to be quarantined and replaced and that type of thing. And that's just the world that we're living in right now. Thankfully, with my commercials, we haven't had that happen. Everyone has tested negative and we all cheer every time that happens. And no, you're not pregnant. Great, amazing, you can work. And then, you know, we go about with our lives. But we have had, because we do the symptom surveys within 24 hours of coming to set, and we have had some people answer very concerningly, is that a word, on those, and had to have our COVID officer get on the phone and talk them through to understand, like, okay, if you were in contact with someone that now has COVID, we want to double negative from you as far as testing goes, you know, over like a 48-hour period. And other people just didn't really understand the questions, or they were trying to be like super vigilant. And so it said, if you've had a headache in the last 14 days, you're like, well, I did, you know, and it's like, no, is it different than your normal? And so trying to really kind of nail down those things of like, they're like, one of the questions is something about sneezing. And I'm like, have you met 2020? I'm allergic to 2020. So I'm sneezing over here quite a bit, but just understanding and making sure to have those conversations. And then, you know, I make sure I don't like medicine as a rule, but I take allergy pills when I'm going to set because I don't want to freak people out. Yeah. You know, with me sneezing because it's a high mold count this year.
Yeah, we've had a lot of rain. I should also add that we, for our audience, we've got five free panels this year. This is one of them. We also have auditioning, where we had Susan Moss, who is SAG's local compliance officer, come in and talk about what her role is and how that goes, how things in casting have been going and how that's worked. And then Mike Panuski's on the local board, so he kind of talked about concerns that they're hearing from actors. We also have a panel on actors who have gotten back to work or who are running taping services, talking about, you know, kind of the concerns and things they're seeing. We had a remote post-production. That's three, this one and something else I'm forgetting off the top of my head. Acting, remote post, testing, something else. I don't know, look at the website. I can't remember all of these things I created. But there's a wealth of information out there depending on if crew, you know, if you're not crew and you're cast and you're looking for something, that information is there, and same with post-production. So talk about testing, because that is super confusing. I have heard that features in television do different kinds of tests and more testing, depending on which pod you're in and all that kind of stuff, than commercials do. So tell us, start, I guess, with the kinds of tests. Or you tell me, because again, I don't know what the hell I'm talking about.
It's a giant question. So everything I know is that it changes on a weekly basis on what is approved and what isn't. The biggest resource to check in with is SAG on what they're accepting, because I know of some productions that have purchased a bunch of tests and then due to FDA rules and whatnot, SAG decided that they were not good enough. They didn't have a high enough percentage. And so thankfully they were able to return the test and get a different kind of test, but I would just check beforehand. There are obviously the PCR test, which is the standard. Typically productions that are going into production now have kind of a deal with a lab where they can get a 24-hour result.
And this is the nasal swab test?
This is the nasal swab, the one that makes me sneeze so much. Like, I have to take a break in between nostrils. It makes me sneeze so much. But it is still, to this day, the highest percentage effective, least false positives. After that, there is a blood antigen test that is a finger prick, and it's looking for the active, like it's good within, I think, 24 hours, 24 to 48 hours of you contracting the virus. Will tell you that. And they use that a lot in LA. It seems to be their preferred method of testing because it's also a rapid test. So you can get results in 15 to 30 minutes. And if somebody tests positive, then they quarantine them for 2 days and do a PCR test as well to see if there's any chance of a negative. But that's still in the high, it's like 95 to 97% accurate. Then you get
which
down,
is actually pretty good.
which is pretty good. There are other types of tests that are more in the 80s. So the at-home test where you administer it yourself has a higher or lesser rate because you're doing it yourself and you're not a medical professional.
Yeah. And is that the cheek swab one?
There are cheek swab ones. There are also nasal swab ones. I just actually did one today because our productions pay for 1 to 2 tests depending on the run in a week. And so I had 2 tests for this previous commercial, but I've been home for 2 days now. And so I wanted to just confirm that I hadn't brought anything home. So an 89, 90% at home test, which I left up my nose for a very long time, like 15 seconds. And then I send it off to a lab and I'll get the results this weekend to know, am I good to move on to the commercial next week? And then they will also test me again. It's a 2 to 3 times a week thing right now, especially, but I think that's important because I'm moving from production to production and I'm not always working with the same people. And that terrifies me. I don't want to ever transmit anything. And I don't want to get sick. And so I'm just trying to be as conscientious as possible. You asked me a question, testing. So there are a whole bunch of tests out there. They are changing by the week, honestly. The best thing to do is just to follow the CDC's website and see what's out there. Also the FDA. So what happened with the FDA is they pushed emergency approval for a bunch of tests because we desperately needed something. And now they are actually able to spend the time to go back and kind of re-examine those. And so some of them are not FDA approved. And the ones that SAG and IATSE want you to use are the FDA approved ones. That is changing. You have to get on the FDA website, do the work yourself, and figure out which ones, are right for your production. Georgia is in a really good place when it comes to testing because we have more availability than most states for testing. And so if you can put the money aside or raise the money for your short film or whatever, they are readily available. It's not at all like New York. I just had a director fly in from New York last week, and it took us probably 2 days to find a clinic that would test her prior to getting on the plane. And then we had a nurse waiting at her hotel when she arrived, like ready to administer a test. And we had results in, 24 hours and all was well on the Georgia side. The New York side was terrifying. And it varies by state, obviously. Yeah. But the great thing, because we're in production, we do have these resources, and PPE is readily available. And we went through the Georgia film website from the state and started vetting everybody they listed that like qualified for the tax credit, and maybe 2 months ago, and have made some like solid friends and figured out which warehouses we want to go to for like mass orders of everything you can imagine.
That's great. So I've heard 2 different things, and I'm curious if, because you're a producer, because you still hire people. So I've had some friends say that every 2 weeks, because their county gives free tests, they've been going to get tested, even though they've stayed at home, but they're still going to the grocery store. I mean, you still got to get out, and, some of them are getting takeout. Because they want to have their own metric, but at the same time, they've had productions call them and say, when was your last test? So they want to have an answer for that instead of, oh, I've never been tested. So, I reached out to a couple friends and said, hey, I know you want to go back to work. You might want to go get one of these free tests. And one of them is like, no, I'm not going to go do that. Production can pay for my time in the test. And I was like, okay, well, you might get this question. I don't know if they can ask you that or not, but it seems like good preventative to know what that test feels like, to be able to say, yes, 2 weeks ago I passed. But I mean, his point was, well, yesterday I was at the grocery store. I could have caught it yesterday. What is your feeling on self-testing, if it's free or you have the money, every couple of weeks, once a month? What's your thought on that?
Well, I'm testing myself every week because I'm working.
Right.
So I probably lean more toward being prepared. I understand. So certain people are like terrified of certain tests, like don't want to scramble their brains or whatever that may be. I think it doesn't. So what I like, it's not necessarily that I'm not going to hire someone because they've never been tested,
Right.
if they are the only person that's going to do the job. But I can tell you, if somebody, and this has happened as I'm hiring, specifically PAs, when they send their resume, they send in their last COVID results. And they're just like, I just want you to know I am proactive. I am about this. Like, I want to get to work. And it shows to me a spirit of people that are willing to do what it takes to keep each other safe. And that's actually what I'm looking for. So
Yeah.
I would have more questions for someone that has never been tested, because I would want to understand, like, okay, are you like fully quarantined? And like we had a camera op that was requested by the director and everything. And he was like, I've never been tested. My wife is recovering from cancer. I don't leave our house. Like, we literally, and I'm like, I totally understand. Here are COVID protocols. You let me know if you feel good to do this. And he did. But that, that was a special circumstance in a case, not just like, oh, I'm not going to be bothered with it. I think if it's free, if you are being around people, especially if it's not just like a 15-minute grocery store run, I think it's worth it. If you've eaten on a patio, whatever that is, I definitely would. As long as it's not going to like break the bank, these resources are available. I did one of the core test early on when I had been around a large crowd and was like, I've got COVID. I got to do something about this. And I didn't. I had allergies, but still, it was very nice to know. I ended up sitting in line for a free test for like 7 hours.
Wow.
Because it was like, everybody was in a bit of a panic in like, I think it was mid-July. Because the thing about CORE is they don't necessarily put out testing sites for next week because they don't know if they're going to have the money to pay for them. And so it's kind of a week by week thing, but they're doing amazing work. And they just generally show up in like churches around town, parking lots, and you can either walk up or drive up. And that's a site you can Google. CORE, it's C.O.R.E. testing, and then it's by county.
Got it.
You can just go get tested.
Yeah.
I do think to your point, at this point, being 6 months in, if somebody hasn't had a test and doesn't have a reason to not be tested, then I would have some questions. I would definitely want to dig into that further, because our jobs require us to be in the same room with people.
Yeah.
And there's no way around it.
Yeah. Oh, I mean, JD and I haven't gotten tested. He's going back to work, but we've been on full on lockdown because he's a first AD. He is in pod A. His job was 3 weeks into prep before the shutdown. And then he basically came to Florida, at our house in Florida. And, we don't see anybody there. We yell across the fence to the neighbors. But, we were in full quarantine. We came back here, we haven't gone to restaurants. We rarely get takeout. I've been wearing masks since March, but neither one of us got tested. But we were so quarantined because I know he's got to go back to work. I can't get him sick. He's the one that's going to go back to work, and I'm not. So we've been very careful. And now he just picked up a job for October because that one finally, the studios were like, it's not, it was a football movie. There, tons of extras.
Too many people.
Well, they were going to get rid of all that stuff. They were thinking about quarantining, but all of those extra costs start to add up. I mean, that's the problem for independent filmmakers, or low budget projects, even be it low budget commercials. The PPE takes money. The testing takes money. It takes longer to do everything. In some cases, you need more people, not less people, because you're trying to keep the people off buying and, and going into stores and being with people, away from the people who are pulling things out of lockup that sits there for 3 days. So, you know, it is a bit of a challenge. There's a lot going on, and there's a lot of moving pieces.
There are. I would say one thing that has kind of come out of this is that it wasn't as bad as studios thought back in March, April, May. Like, they were estimating 30% budget increases. And what I'm seeing is much more like 7 to 10%.
Yeah.
Which is still something. Like, it is still money. But, you know, for like, I just did an assessment on a $2 million film, and it's going to be right around $100,000 to get the testing, the PPE, and the COVID officer. Now, that does not include decisions like, instead of having man-days for G&E, we're going to add on a full person. So that's an expense. It's not a big expense because I had a pocket of money for man-days, but it's still an expense because I didn't plan on having him for run of show, you know?
Yeah.
So there's decisions like that that do impact the budget outside of things. And obviously catering cost, crafty cost have gone up because it's all individual now. But it's still manageable. Like, I am happy to see that it's not this, like, COVID has not prevented independent film from happening. It's more like you have to be very smart. You have to make your decisions beforehand. You have to stick with them, which personally I'm really glad about, that you can't just have a creative whim and, you know, add a whole bunch of art or wardrobe or whatever because of all of the different safeguards that have to be in place. And I think it's making us smarter filmmakers, honestly, because this thing, you know, we've said this over and over, we solve problems for a living. We come up with creative solutions for a living. COVID is just a big annoying problem that we're all coming up with creative solutions for. And it does depend on the script. But there are ways, you know, I've seen short films that did crowdfunding for their PPE and testing. I've seen other short films that like did a coordinated, and I say this because people from short films come to my commercials and I don't want them to get me sick.
Yeah.
So I'm all about short films doing something like having a COVID plan, being smart. One of the short films did a whole, like the week before, here are all the different core sites where you could go get tested for free in order to come and be on this passion project for 2 days or whatever. And, you know, that is an option. I don't like it when regular films do that because I think you can find the money one way or another. And I think production should pay for it, both PPE and testing. And then whatever, if there's bubbling or whatever that is that goes along with it, I do think the production should take that on because there are ways to do that. You just have to maybe trim a location and move that money around, you know, like you just have to budget smart.
Write smartly for the times we're in, you know. 2-room dramas are great, or 2-person dramas set outside.
One house horror film, absolutely. Yeah.
I want to stay on the topic of indies for just a quick minute. I think it is possible. I think where I would have concerns when it comes to like my PAs in the PA Academy getting called for things, because a lot of people reach out to me, hey, we need some, you know, internships, free people looking to learn in exchange for a credit. When they're not Screen Actors Guild or 479 or 600, it makes me nervous. I am finding, you know, I know that there are some shows shot in town that don't use Screen Actors Guild actors, but have a union crew. And I know there's a lot of SAG-AFTRA low budget shoots that don't use a union crew. But doing away with nothing union gives me pause because there is no one, I mean, even though on a non-union show, you can call the safety hotlines and report those things. It would give me pause even to offer them an opportunity on something that has no union or guild connection, simply because there is no one to ensure that things are going to go well. The producer can say, oh, well, we're going to have PPE and we're going to follow stuff. Well, who the fuck are you? And what do you know? And who is going to challenge you when things aren't done well? There's no one keeping you accountable. What are your thoughts on that?
Very similar. I mean, I would probably take it further in asking, like, can I see your full protocol document based on your script? Can I see exactly what you're planning to do per each location? These are all things SAG is asking for. And I think that that's important questions. What is your testing protocol? How often? Whoops, I just lost an earpiece. Somewhere in my hair. Testing protocol, PPE, and who is responsible? Like, who is your COVID person and whatnot? And if they can't answer very solidly, well thought out to each one of those, run.
Yeah. So is the COVID compliance officer something that, so is that technically what your position was or is?
No,
I guess,
yes, sometimes.
yeah,
I have been a COVID compliance officer on shoots where that was 100% my job. On the last shoot, I was the UPM and I hired the COVID compliance officer, and then we collaborated because it was a very quick turnaround. And so I worked with the agency to figure out exactly, they already had COVID compliance protocols for their company. I took those and adjusted them for our location because I was brought on a week in advance, whereas the COVID compliance officer had 1 day. So we collaborated together on our tech scout to come up with the plan that worked for catering to be distance, to make sure we had checkpoints. And thankfully this was also, we were at an arena, which also had, you had to take your temperature, you had to get scanned, you had to have take the symptom survey. So they almost did it twice for us to shoot there, but it worked out really well. It depends. I prefer to produce because that's what I love, but I do COVID compliance officer work as well. That just becomes more of managing like your testing vendors and making sure everybody is properly wearing their mask. And one of the big things that people don't understand is the need to change your mask if it gets wet. And if you're in Georgia shooting, even on an air-conditioned soundstage, your mask is wet by lunch, 100%. And so really helping educate people on, if you use a paper mask under your mask, you can change that out. Also, it helps with mask acne, which has become a thing. Like I started having like all of these like little pimples right around my mouth, and I'm just like, I am way too old for this. What is happening? But just like that cave of moisture there is problematic. And so really like part of my thought process in all of this is figuring out how we make it more livable, but also explaining to people like, okay, ideally the CDC recommends that you change a paper mask every 2 hours because you're breathing moisture into it. If you want to wear your other mask on top of it, that's great. Or, you know, you change it out, you have a face shield, whatever that is. Figuring out good options for people so that everybody stays dry and their masks are able to function properly is huge. It's honestly the biggest thing we can do to stay safe on an hourly by hourly basis, along with washing hands, hand sanitizer. But also like working with ADs on figuring out when are our hydration breaks, when are our mask breaks where people can step away into like whatever their pod areas are, or just out into a field and take off their masks for 2 minutes before they have to come back. It's huge. It's a huge morale thing. And it's also just, it irritates you after a while. Like I started getting raw spots here from where the mask kind of like dug into me, and had to figure out, what am I going to do about this? Like I'm wearing this 14 hours a day. What are my options? And talked with some different makeup people to get like products and different things to help. But little things like having an overabundance of breath mints, huge, because I thought I was dying and turned out it was just coffee breath. Like it was bad. And you have to live with that, you know, and that's not something that you're like super aware of in that concentrated a sense. And so like making sure that's available for crew, having like makeup wipes if people want to clean their face during their mask break, just to like a sense of freshness because you've been sweating into like on yourself and it just stays in this little pocket for hours. Also straws, making sure we have, whether it's the biodegradable straws or if it's a longer production, gifting people with like a straw that they can keep. Huge, because otherwise you're not drinking water. If you can't remove your mask because you're within 6 feet of an actor, camera doesn't drink water. And so making sure you have the option to like slip a straw up under your mask and not expose people is huge. So just like, those are the little things that I'm learning and other people are kind of telling me as we go through this, like being on set process, because it does make you hotter when you have to wear a mask, you know?
Yeah.
It is more easier to get overheated, but there are also ways to mitigate that. And so just making sure production has thought through those things, and often like the financial impact of something based on, sorry, I said that wrong. The financial impact versus the actual like morale boost and effect is very minimal.
Yeah.
Like it's buying straws for people. Okay, that's their crew gift now instead of a water bottle, you know, or like you have money in there already. You just have to figure out how to use it wisely for COVID times. And
Yeah.
that's what we're having to kind of like this learn in this giant learning curve of how to make life livable doing this.
Yeah. We had Sarah Mays, who is a makeup department head on features and TV, on one of our panels. And she was talking about how, you know, actors take off their masks. Well, normally that would be something that the makeup department would touch. Well, you can't touch it. So you got to put it in a container for the actor, but then you're touching the container that the actor has. So it took a long time for them to figure out. So now they have a table set up where all of the individual mask cases have the actor's name on it. And the actor will walk over, open it up, put their mask inside, close it. And, you know, it's close enough to set that they're not going into anybody else. It's like a prop table, basically.
Yeah.
And that's how they figured it out. And in the makeup trailer, they have these, you know, makeup and hair are now separated. They are not sharing spaces. Every makeup chair has sides, you know, plexiglass sides, and everyone can only walk up into their chair. There's no walking back and forth through the trailer anymore. And all of their stuff is in plastic containers, because plastic containers aren't porous. They can put everything, you know, sanitize something, put inside, and then if an actor is breathing in the space while they're getting them ready, they're not breathing over all of their stuff. So it's really interesting to see how all the different departments are kind of stumbling through things to figure out, oh, gee, well, we hadn't thought about this. How can we alter what we do to make this make sense and safe? And it's really heartening, I guess, to see like all of these people figure this out and come up with really, really unique ways to do it. And that's what I love about our business. It's so
absolutely. And I think that's what's so important about actually encouraging everybody to take every certification they can, because you're going to see it through the filter of your job, you know, and understanding that makeup is going to do things way different than grip is going to do, than sound is going to do, than camera, and just being able to help take all of this wealth of knowledge and then push it through that filter of your department and your specific needs. That's how we stay safe.
Yeah. So what my original question was going to be is there's different terms. So the COVID compliance officer, where I was headed with that, although that was fabulous. So I'm glad you answered that way. So there are different titles. Like, to me, somebody who is in charge of all this stuff should have a medical background or some sort of medical background, because sure, we can understand about contact tracing and cleaning surfaces and, you know, checking a temperature, but there's just little things that, like, you know, there are times where I've gone to the medic on set and been like, I don't feel right. And I didn't know why I didn't feel right. And he's like, okay, well, he could ask me some really smart questions that we went, oh, okay, so maybe I'm overheated a little bit, and, you know, or I need to take this for this symptom, or I should go do this. And they were asking me questions that, like, I never thought of before, because I had never experienced what I was feeling before. It was like 114 degrees, you know, and I just wasn't feeling right. And I didn't realize, because I love the heat, that that's what that was. There were certain symptoms that weren't what are normally those, like, heat stroke, overheated things. So are there different positions, and are there certain requirements of that job? Because it just doesn't, like, PAs to me just probably shouldn't be COVID compliance officers. And I'm sorry, PAs, don't get mad at me, but
they can be.
And how?
The COVID, everybody that takes a job as a COVID compliance officer or a health and safety manager, and I'll explain the difference between the two in a minute, should be a managerial position. They should have management experience, and they should understand that they are basically in charge of the health and safety of an entire crew. What the white paper recommends is, whether it's a company that has like spearheaded a medical company, basically, and a lot of them are learning film, which is the adjustment that we're all going through now. The COVID compliance officer, all of the networks are going for set medics with extensive, like 20 years experience, that also have a ton of COVID training, that have taken all of these certifications and that are able to focus and really hone in specifically on the medical side of COVID, the contact tracing, understanding temperature checks and like what you're actually looking for, and like the differences between the temperatures over certain days and morning versus night, and like very medical specific stuff. The health and safety manager is basically the production side to that puzzle. So they are a UPM that, like myself, that has learned all of this stuff, that understands scheduling, locations, production, times, like, oh, if it takes 10 minutes to get everybody through this temp check survey thing, what am I doing with, how am I dealing with the AD department? What do we need to figure out? If, we're looking at only certain zones being in a space, a location at a time, then how are we redoing our schedule? And so having those conversations that are production facing while also working hand in hand with your COVID officer. Now, they recommend, those are your two like main people. And then you need a person that is not a PA for every 25 people on your crew to help with compliance, to keep mask up, mask. I literally do this all day long, over your nose, over your nose.
So why would you say that if that's what their responsibilities are, it shouldn't be a PA?
Because nobody actually listens to a PA.
Right. Well, it wouldn't be one of the PAs that you've hired to be on set, but it could be a PA that has gone through all this stuff, or no?
I would say they need to be they have to be a very confident management person, because if you're telling a grumpy key grip who is 40 years older than you to pull up his mask, he is not going to listen to somebody that's 25 years old. Chances are. So you need to have people that have a certain, and I'm thankfully not in a grip in my 60s, but like that's still a thing that I have to have a certain level of authority to say, stop, do this, or you're going to need to leave set, And so there has to be that. Now, are there PAs that are a part of this team? Of course. You need people that are wiping down tables, that are wiping every single doorknob, that are handling touch points, that can make sure PPE is readily available, even just walking around with hand sanitizer, and or encouraging, like standing at the front of catering and making sure every single person washes their hands before they go and pick up their food. Things like that, yes, they are an important part of the team, but they're not management. And I wouldn't put that on. Most people that are PAs are young. This is their first, or it may be 25th PA job, but like they're still not quite in that management position. There are a few exceptions, but most of them are on the AD track, and they're DGA and moving that way quickly. And they could do that role. But I would say the majority of PAs I wouldn't put in that position. I would have them learn under these other people that are your production managers, your potentially production coordinators, like people that can handle just dealing with crew.
Yeah.
And
I get it. Yeah.
Thankfully I have lovely crews that I work with and really haven't had any problems, but that is a thing. And it just has to be taken into consideration that these are management roles.
So are you finding then that, it makes perfect sense because, Megan King, who works in commercials, she has taken these courses. She's actually working at Turner now, doing some of the compliance for them because they're broadcast, they're on the air, especially NBA championships, but, so are there companies that people are hiring to do this additional cleaning? Like who are the people that are doing the cleaning and the touch points and all that on set? Is this a company you're hiring? Is this crew members that are already on set? Are you hiring additional crew members to come in and do that? And if not PAs, who would they be? Like, where are these cleaning people coming from?
So it's a bit of a combination depending on, again, your script, your location, your specific issues. Typically, so when we film on stage, we have a company that comes in and does like a cleaning bomb of the entire stage before any of our, before art department does prep, before anybody sets foot. And then they will also do it after we leave. Usually we pay for the first one and the stage pays for the second one. And that's kind of how it's been. Now with a location, like a house, if you're renting a house, production would pay for both, because that's the only way a family is going to let you move them somewhere else and whatnot.
Yeah.
You have to do that. So you have, and that is a service. There are several services in Georgia that provide that, that will do a full on like complete, and I think it lasts for around 3 days. So it kills everything on contact up to 3 days. And then you want to do it again if you're staying in the house for longer. So that would be something that they could come in after you wrap, do that, and then it's clean for another 3 days. For your general like touch points, like doorknobs, bathroom kind of thing, you can either have a cleaning service, or on smaller stuff, I have used PAs. As long as they understand, like when we spray down a table, it needs to sit for 20 seconds prior to wiping it off. Like it has to, you know, and they understand those things. Wiping doorknobs just as often as possible. Yeah, they can totally do that.
So is this a PA that is part of your crew on that job, or are you hiring an additional PA to do that full time?
It depends. I would say if you're looking at a longer production, it's part of your COVID team. Like that's what the PAs are doing as part of that COVID team. So there may be 2, 3, 17, I don't know, depending on the size and the amount of stuff, but they are under the supervision of the COVID officer and the health and safety manager. If it's a smaller, like 1-day production and you have 6 PAs, you can probably, one of the things, we had a 1-day production with 6 PAs. And so we asked, each one of them got an hour that we would rotate for over 12 hours. So they did 2 hours of cleaning a day and the rest was like regular PA stuff. That way nobody got burned out on it. It was 1 day and they had a list of all of the touch points that they would clean. And that worked really well because we had 6 PAs and, you know, 40 people on set. Yeah. And so that was a nice kind of meet in the middle. We could have had 1 cleaning PA. My thing was like, I just feel so bad for that person because it's such a boring job that when we talked to our PAs, it was like, they're willing to do part of it, but like not have to clean bathrooms all day, you know? So it's really just about being very, very mindful and making sure you're not just dumping more work onto somebody that's already going to be overworked. With having 6 PAs, a 40-member crew, and a 1-day shoot, the bulk of what they did was the beginning and the end of the day. And so it worked out well. But that might not be the case, you know, in a different scenario. So you have to think through it and you have to figure out where it makes sense to put money on people.
So obviously the mask wearing thing, I mean, I've been doing it since March. It doesn't bother me. You know, I can wear it all day long and breathe fine. It's annoying, but I can do it. I haven't been back on set because I'm on a long hiatus, but you know, it's the one thing everybody has talked about, like always, constantly, keep it up over your nose, keep it up over your nose. Cause I see them a lot. They just start to like fall down. Like I have ones, that tie. I don't like the ear things. Mm-hmm. But what are some of the other things, you know, our jobs are so, habit driven. You know, mm-hmm. we've been making movies forever, or TV shows or commercials or music videos. We have habits and you're trying to unbreak muscle memory. What mm-hmm. are some of the other things other than mask wearing that you see are just kind of common mistakes that aren't nefarious, but things that we're just like, oh shit, I keep forgetting, you know, that's just not the way your brain works.
I mean, the distancing is hard, you know, and sometimes, and what it is I'm not looking and expecting that like, okay, people walking through this doorway are always going to be 6 feet apart. It's prolonged exposure mm-hmm. and closeness over, you know, an hour, 2 hours. And so figuring out, can we have plexiglass as a barrier here? Can we, you know, like what are the ways that I can keep it under 10 minutes for people to be within that closeness? And that is partially, you know, you mitigate that with zones in that those people are allowed to be closer to each other. I am stricter than what they say. I prefer to break my crew up into like 5 to 6 zones, not 3, because I want, if somebody were to go down, I really don't want to have to replace 50 people. Yeah. And I'd like for 50 people to be able to keep their jobs, and maybe I quarantine 10 or 8 or whatever that is. And so really being very stringent on who those groups are. And the largest one is obviously your set group, but even to the point of having like, okay, I have a props master that is outside of my zone A that is like coordinating everything, and an assistant that is actually handing the props, taking them back, cleaning them, and putting them up. Because, and I think you asked this question earlier, like who are all the people doing the cleaning? Well, when it comes to camera, I literally don't want any person that is not in camera touching camera or cleaning it. So that becomes a part of it, but that's the only part that's their responsibility. Same with makeup, same with art, like their piece of the world. If art tells me, look, we're getting all of this stuff and we're going to need to add another person, great. We'll sit down, we'll look at the budget, we'll figure out, you know, how we make it work. But that becomes a little bit of a time thing because you're cleaning it every single day. But again, I'm not going to have a PA do it. I'm not going to have a cleaning service do it. Like they're doing the kind of broader scope things. And then when it comes to the specialty items, it's the departments.
Yeah. And I think that's important because a lot of people don't understand how the chemicals react with different things. So Sarah Mays was talking about their face shields. You know, the first time they went to clean them with alcohol, like they got all scratched up and then they became unusable. And there are these really great masks, and I wish I'll send it to you. I wish I had it. We talked about it in one of the other panels. That is, it's clear here, and it's like a mask that fits over your glasses. A lot of camera people are using this. So it's a blue face shield, and it's got literally like goggles, like swim goggles here that can go over your glasses. So it keeps you from fogging everything up. And then there's and then there's like a little piece here that sits out a little bit that allows you to put your mask or your double masks underneath that and kind of hold them in place. But it also allows it to sit out a little bit. So it's not like shoving into your face. And you know, I should probably look this up, but I don't want to start looking around on my thing and ignoring you. But yeah, it was a new mask, and she said you could find them on Amazon, but like the markup is really huge. But if you go into some like Office Depot, office supply type stores, or, you know, you could find them there. But they're quickly becoming something that the camera department is loving because it's helping. Anybody with glasses knows wearing a mask, if you don't have something that you can put on them, like when I used to ski, I'd put certain things on them to keep them from fogging up. It's a real problem in camera. That's a thing you don't want. You also don't want to
be like, I can't tell if I have focus.
Chemicals. You know. So there's a lot of, you know, chemicals react to certain materials. So those professionals whose stuff it is should be the ones handling it, simply because we don't want to start ruining all their stuff. Especially
I really don't, because I have to pay for it.
Yeah. And I guess the camera department has now putting like, you know, a cap over the filter of their camera or over the lens. But, you know, they were wiping the front of it, but forgetting about the edges. And they realized, like, if you take that lens and you know, when you do a lens swap, you just grab a lens and you swap it and you put it in the case. Well, now you've put that in the case.
And everything's contaminated.
And you've contaminated it. And with people waiting 3 days for, you know, we're going to go ahead and put all the gear in there for 3 days. Well, that's great. But in the camera box, if you didn't clean the entire camera before you put it back in the box, now you've let all those germs grow for 3 days in that box. And what wasn't contaminated before is now contaminated the entire box. So you can't just take the stuff, not clean it, and send it back to a rental house, because if it sits there for 3 days and is porous, it can create issues, you know? So there's all kinds of like little nuance things that people just, again, are kind of figuring out along the way. What are some other things that you guys may have kind of experienced like that?
Wardrobe, like really figuring out how you handle and like keep separate wardrobe, which has been a thing. And then there's a couple different services that either offer drop-off cleaning every night, like overnight or day or whatever, or you can actually, depending on the size of your production, there's a company in town that has on-site cleaning units, and they're like, it's like $11,000 for the month, but it takes like 5 seconds to sanitize an entire outfit, and then you just run them through, and just making sure, because the issue is like, okay, yes, it's the same person wearing stuff, but Could they have picked something up? Could something have grown on it? Like it's not enough just to spray it down and hang it up again, you know, and wash it every, I don't know, 3 days. There's SAG rules around it, and wardrobe's always great about that. But now it's like anytime somebody sweats, anytime there's a chance of another actor breathing on their wardrobe, it needs to be cleaned before they put it on again. And just figuring out like the bags that you put them in. So they're putting them in plastic bags, but you have to make sure they're clean before they go in there, or it just becomes like a festering petri dish, you know. And you just have to think through all of it so much, and have a lot of preparation. I do see definitely more prep time for all of these departments because they're not only figuring out the creative and the logistics, but now there's the COVID logistics of everything. And it's just a lot.
Yeah. And speaking of that, that is the perfect transition to, it is a lot. Our jobs are super stressful. There's a lot of money at risk, you know. I mean, people think, oh, you're just making entertainment. Well, there's, you know, I mean, we work long hours, and a lot of money is on the line, more so in features and TV than commercials. But still, if you're doing a $250,000, $500,000, $2 million commercial, there's some stress involved in that. Like even the no money jobs, there's stress involved. Now you add all of this other, now it's the fear of the other. It's the fear of getting sick. It's the fear of getting somebody else sick. Like, talk about the kind of added stress that this makes on our jobs. Just no different than the person working in the grocery store who has to worry about every single person walking in, especially those fun people who decide they don't need to wear masks because they don't care about anybody other than themselves. But, there's that, we're talking about the crew morale, it's got to be even more exhausting to be on set now because you have to train your brain to constantly think about this other thing that is truly a risk.
Yeah. I mean, I would say that's why you have a COVID compliance department now, is because they're basically thinking about that for everybody else. And so I'm not saying a person that lets their mask is kind of worn out and drops below their nose doesn't want to keep me safe. They're just focused on other things, and that's fine.
Oh, absolutely.
It's just a matter of, it's got to be over your nose. And somebody has to be thinking about that always. And that needs to be their only job. And that's why this whole new department has come about, because we still have a full-time job doing other things that are not related to COVID. And now there is an added pressure. I know there's a lot of talk on trying to reduce hours and to really keep it to 10-hour shooting days, which would be 12 to 13-hour work days, which would be lovely. And I have seen some of that be successful, and then some of it's just like not really possible. But the idea of really taking the thing that I've seen that is encouraging is the shift in mentality about how we view our crew and their health. And we don't just expect them to take Dayquil and show up with the flu, which I have done. I wore a mask. I had a film that was like our entire wardrobe department had to go home and be replaced. Our wardrobe design, like our costume designer, literally helped like pick and direct things from her sick bed via iPad because we were ravaged by the flu. I got it, and I was a producer. Couldn't go home. Didn't at that point, because it was years ago, have the opportunity to have everything like pushed daily, like not just dailies, but like live feed pushed to my laptop. So they made me a little nest, like 10 feet away from people. And there was a monitor that was pointed down at a cot, and I wore a mask and I stayed in my little zone, and they would like slide food to me underneath and like stay away. But it was like, that's what was expected at the time. It's like, you show up, you do your job, the set medic checked in on me. I went to the doctor and got as much as I could to like make sure that I was the least, what's the word?
Contagious.
I was saying contaminant, and that was not right. Least contagious as possible. And I did recover within the week, and but I was on set the whole time that I was sick. Because there was,
and
no
that's
other
always
option.
been the case. I mean, that's
that
always
been that's the expectation of a filmmaker, is you suck it up, medicate it, and come to work. And for the first time, due to COVID, now there's also this concern about the flu. Well, guess what? I don't think anybody wants me coming to set with the flu anymore,
Yeah.
or a cold, or anything. And I think for the first time, we're actually treating crew like human beings, and to having conversations around sick leave, and not just firing the freelancer, because now that is no longer acceptable, where it was for a very long time. And so I'm really hopeful that due to COVID, we're going to be able to change some things in the industry when it comes to healthcare and comes to our expectations of, sick leave, and
Yeah,
not just
I hope
losing
you're
your
right.
job.
Yeah.
I see that so much in the conversation. And if this continues into next year, which everybody is saying it's going to, I think we have to make these changes. And once we make them on a studio level, that becomes the standard. So I'm hopeful that that helps change how things happen. But I forgot
We
your
know the
question.
reality is, well, the reality of the situation, unfortunately, is our business still comes down to money. The
Yes,
studios,
but
they don't
it
want to get
didn't.
anybody sick, but a 10-hour day, I mean, I'd
Well,
love to see
here's the
10-hour
difference.
days.
Here's the difference. The issue with our industry is that we were set up by some very old fat white men in the 1920s, and everything that they put into place has not changed since.
Yeah.
And the fact that in the up until the digital era, camera equipment was prohibitively expensive. Like, indie film didn't really exist until phones and computer, we get into this 80s, 90s, and now we're in a place where anybody can make a movie. Not going to be good necessarily, but anybody can make a movie. And so it has opened a lot of doors for independent film and for just lower budget options. The thing is, it's no longer prohibitive to rent a camera for an additional week. And potentially, when you're looking at whether it's French hours, overtime, if you're looking at 15 hours a day in overtime for your entire crew, it is very similar in cost to just adding catering, camera, G&E for an additional week and
But
cutting
this has
down on
been the
hours.
case, Gabby,
Right.
none
But
of this
there's
has
never
changed
been
in my 25 years.
no,
All
it
of this
hasn't,
has,
because there's been no incentive to do it. But now, if it becomes a reputation thing because of
yeah.
COVID, we might this is our window of opportunity, is what I'm saying. This
Oh,
is
I
the
agree with
first
that.
time, the only time that I've seen the actual rational numbers might get a chance at winning over just, this is how we've always done it, because this is how it was set up in 1920, and that's what we've lived under.
Yeah. We also have a lot of people who want the long hours, because that's where they make you got the Teamsters who those 14, 16, 18-hour days allow them to retire at 50 or work for
True.
6 months and then travel and, have fun for 6 months. I would say half of our industry loves the long hours. It's mostly the younger people, or the ones who, when you're 60, you don't want to do an 18-hour day. When I was 20,
No.
I did a 28, probably 30s. I did a 54-hour day on a music video, so, and I don't like that. Yeah, we've all done it. We don't like it, but we've done it. And I think I've always said there is the diminishing return. The longer you have somebody on set, the more you're paying for less work, less ability, and the more likely you are to kill someone. And I've had these fights with producers for years. I did a commercial where I had to argue with the producer. The PA still was helping me with the production booklet because the commercial happened so late. By the time the agency awarded the job, it was too late for us to get everything done. So I'm dealing with budget and logistics, and I've got one of my good PAs dealing with the production booklet. Hour 18, she wants him to stay and finish in it. I'm like, he can't see straight. He needs to go home or get a hotel room. He's like, no, he needs to stay. I never worked for that company again because I said, he's not staying. I'm sending him home. He doesn't want to stay in a hotel. He feels safe to drive. He's going now. And we had a screaming match in the hallway. And this was a $2 million commercial. And it wasn't that big of a deal. But I don't even think it's that this has been the way forever. Even people in power, even the producers know you can tack on a day or two and make it work when you cut out the overtime. I agree that this is the only time we may have a chance to change this, But I wonder that even after COVID, would it stay? Because everybody's telling me right now they're not doing the shorter hours that everybody is promising. Very few people are. And it's real, that's the disheartening thing to me. Like, this is the hours are what kill us and fatten the bank account for those who get overtime. You know, we don't.
No.
Yeah. So for me, I'm like, fuck that shit. I don't want to do the long hours, but you know, I guess this is one
I
of those
do
things
think,
I'm passionate about.
so I think that there's probably going to be like a split, and I don't know the percentage of the split. I do think there are enough producers that have come up through this like ridiculously hard time, meaning like I work 20 hours a day, you know, like, and I have no choice. And I have to work East Coast to West Coast hours, and it's ridiculous and exhausting. And I literally have to have like a tag team with someone else who can answer the phone so that I can get 4.5 hours sleep, you know? And do I have a life? No. Does my dog get walked? Not by me, you know, like it just, I don't want to live that life. And so I think for me, that offers an incentive as a person in management to find ways to change that for my people. And I know that there are a considerable other number of producers and UPMs and whatnot that do want to fight for this. And this is our opportunity. Is it going to be widespread? I don't know. I do think you're right that there are certain people that love the overtime and the hours and the retiring and the time off. And that's probably always going to exist. Like, there's always going to be several networks that operate that way. And especially in TV, because that's their tight timeline to get content out. But I do think in feature world, like looking at adding an extra week versus, you know, all the OT that we have to do to make it work might, you know, is worth it. And if that's something that I can make money work. Now, COVID makes it difficult because we're trying to get things done as quickly as possible. But I do think we have an open door. And I think that there are people that are going to fight to push through it and see what we can do in that, especially next year. And really seeing how we make this a little bit more livable for people, because, you know, it destroys families.
It does. Yeah. I mean,
Like,
I don't
it
have
really,
kids. Thank you, film industry. You know, I would love to have like grandkids right now, but I got nothing because I was always working. And by the time I came up out of it and went, oh shit, I guess I have gray hair and it's too late now. You know, I mean, divorces. I mean, my now husband, we were together for a few decades before we got married. But I know very few people who I met when I was a PA 25 years ago, 26 years ago, who were these wonderful couples that don't exist together anymore in that space. And yeah, it destroy, I mean, and people die from heart
people
attacks,
literally die,
strokes, and it's not just
and
driving your
off the
car
side
home.
of the road.
Yeah, you know, it's awful. Okay, I'll calm myself and we'll move on.
I still love it. I wouldn't do anything else. Yeah. It's my personal kind of crazy. But I do think that this pandemic has offered us some open doors that I'm hopeful that I'm not the only one that's going to try to beat it down now that we finally have a crack.
Yeah, I keep shoving something in that crack and splitting it open. So how does it feel to be back on set? Like, it's got to be like an alien planet, you know? I mean, you're walking in and all of these people are in, like, your first experience. I mean, now you're an old hat at being on set, but the first time you walked in and you were just like, whoa, like, what does that feel like?
Honestly, it was like coming home. It didn't matter that there was all this PPE. It didn't matter that I needed to get a temp check, and I got my personal hand sanitizer and I washed my hands and I checked in and got my wristband for my zone. Like, we were back and it was amazing. And just like, it's fun. Everybody's favorite compliment is like, oh, you have such pretty eyes. I'm like, I know, it's all you can see. And it's just, I don't know. There's just something so lovely after 6 months at home about just seeing people face to face, 6 feet away, even in your mask. And just like, there is just like this overwhelming sense of joy. And I did really well, even though I kept working mostly for free, working to get work during the pandemic. I really made a point of keeping my weekends like separate so that I had some sense of structure. And the last probably 6 weeks, I've worked all the way straight through my weekends. And normally that is something that I would be like, oh my God, this job. Oh, ugh. And I'm just like thrilled to do it because we're back. We're actually back. And we're figuring it out how to do it safely. And I love every minute of it. Like I love watching, and I'm back in the thing of like, I have 6 PAs. Oh, those 3 are going to make it. They're great. I don't know about that one. That one should be in camera, and you're just like, oh, it's back. It's back. We're doing this. And it's just wonderful. And like, as hard as it is, and as much as it, like the first day, I think I took like 4 mask breaks and just like stepped outside in the parking lot. We were out in a stage, took my mask off and just like breathed for a few seconds and then went back in. But after that, it just became much more like normal. And learning things like change your mask every 2 hours. If you like the paper mask that I have underneath, figuring out ways to like buying straws for people so that we could all drink water, and just the little things that just make it a little bit more manageable. Yeah. But I mean, all in all, it's wonderful. It's so good to be back to work. I've missed it more than I thought. Like Zoom is not enough.
No. So where was I going with this?
You wanted me to have a very negative answer to COVID
no,
and being back on
set.
No.
No, I did not, because everybody's different. Some people were like, it was freaky, but I loved it. Like everybody is so excited to be back. They're equally terrified and excited. It's
right.
It's like that mix of
I don't mind the terror because it keeps us in check, Yeah. But it was lovely to see people and to work safely with people and seeing everybody like just doing exactly what the protocol said.
Yeah.
And the most,
sorry, go ahead.
The biggest issue was the mask up, because we get distracted. And I found it happened a couple times. I was like, oh, I'm going to go change my mask because it's clearly stretched out a little bit. And, just, you just kind of figure it out.
So this was going to be my next question. So a lot of our business is intimate conversations in close spaces. The director leans into the actor to give him notes, or the AD leans into the actor to give him notes because the director is at the monitor. Now we can have those intimate conversations, but we're doing things like yelling through a mask to people 6 feet away, which isn't good that we're all yelling. Because things get kind of noisy. So are people, using, are you finding different ways to communicate? Are you using texting more, walkie-talkies more? I mean, walkies
Definitely.
Obviously add a weird thing because, I don't know. It's all kind of, how is the communication happening?
It's between walkies on a dedicated channel where they can like softly talk to each other and not yell. Or like dedicated, just like a burner phone where they can have a conversation, sanitize it, stick it in their pocket. It's just for that actor, and the director has one, and each actor has one, and they're $30, That's a really easy way to do it. I mean, you could call their cell phones if you wanted, as well. Like that's totally, it just became a thing. We were like, let's just do burner phones for everybody. So that way we're not reimbursing cell phone bills, and it kind of was cleaner for accounting. But I mean, you could do it any way you want. The idea is to keep the intimacy there, but do it where like you're staring eye to eye, but you're having this conversation about this character change, because you want it to be private, because the whole idea of that intimate conversation is that then the other actors don't know about it. Yeah. And you're getting that surprise factor, or you're getting that emotional beat that you want and whatnot. And it's just, thankfully, we're having a pandemic in the time of technology. I don't know how they did this in like 1918. Dear God. At least we have Zoom.
Yeah. So clients on your commercials, I don't know if they were local or they were out of town. Have you been doing, have you been working where, the director is in one state, kind of like you were off in your little cubicle when you had the flu? Have you been doing a lot of remote communication?
Kind of 50-50. So we had one of my commercials had some remote clients plus local clients, and we put them in their own room with their own monitors and communication system to be able to talk to the director. And then on the one I did last week, all the clients were remote in LA and New York. And so our DTR service set up like a 16-person Q-tape Zoom thing. And they watched the entire thing live. They even watched like all of our camera rehearsals and gave notes on it. They gave notes on lighting and haze and like all of the things. So they were able to basically be with us all day, and give feedback to the director like in real time, the whole time. And it was nice because I love clients and that they pay me, but it's also nice when they're not on set.
Yeah. Yes, I agree.
Yeah. It also really helps streamline the creative. So it was
that's what I was going to get to next. Approvals and making sure that we're not doing that constant change. Oh, now I see him in that outfit I approved 6 weeks ago. I don't like it. Can you send somebody out to get something else? Like, how is that stuff kind of going?
I mean, you do more on the front end. So like, it's not one outfit you approve. It's like 3 that can be interchangeable. And those are all cleaned and quarantined and ready to go just in case. Because it is a thing, clients are going to change their minds, or we get in the space and like this black doesn't look black anymore, or I don't know, things that happen. So the purchasing up front is a lot bigger because you cannot run out and get it on the day. Then you clean it all and return it.
Yeah.
And most places are taking things, especially if you're giving them a cleaning receipt with it, as far as returns go.
Right. What else you got? I mean, we did actually one on COVID and the crew. That was the one I wasn't forgetting about. We're covering a lot of the same territory, but I think it's really important to get different people's perspectives because everybody is on different shows. Everything is run differently. We're all learning as we go and figuring out things and sharing. Is there anything that we have missed that you'd like to talk about?
I don't know.
Other than be kind to people.
There is that. Have a lot of patience. It's hard. Nobody has this figured out. And some people are doing it maybe better than others, but nobody has it down. And there's going to be mistakes. And I think it's also important to empower the crew to speak into that. If they're saying something like, we don't want to turn it into a whining fest, but also having somebody that everybody can go to and say, hey, I feel like this is not sanitized enough, or, whatever it is, this thing scares me. What can we do to address that? And, similar with like Safety for Sarah and having options hotlines for sexual harassment. Like this is just another thing where there need to be options. And even for non-union people, I will say, I know you said this before, you can call the unions and they will step in for you 100%, specifically with COVID stuff now. Like they have done it and will continue to do it because nobody wants to pollute and like corrupt our pool of workers here. We really, really want to stay safe and stay working. And even if you're on a non-union show, you're going to have probably a couple union members and then potentially jump to another show that is union. Who knows? There's potential for a lot of cross-contamination. So if you're scared about something and if it doesn't seem to be run safely, feel free to call the union. Feel free to post it on Facebook and tag everybody like, don't be shy. This is people's lives.
I'd be careful about the tag on Facebook thing.
Okay.
Only because, like, you don't want to call somebody out when they may not have been.
I meant tag your friend.
Yeah. To ask a question or, yeah.
Yeah, tag your friend. Like, if you know me, tag me and I will answer your question as much as possible. Not call people out in the sense of like whoever did it.
So wasn't wearing them. Yeah, we need.
But you could tag me and Linda and say, I have a problem. Here's my question. Who can I get to help? And then you get people to help. That's what I meant.
Yes, thank you for that clarification. Sarah was talking about on her set, like, she's seen a couple people that she thought, oh, they should probably wear their mask or they should do this, but it's so ingrained to us not to be a snitch. We're a family. We don't snitch on each other. Safety for Sarah. I think that's about, that's a real, like, somebody died because of negligence and they should have spoken up or could have spoken up. People, it was just such a hot mess that I think we all learned a lot from that. But that's still ingrained in us, like, well, we don't want to tell on our friend, even though these things are anonymous. How do you empower people to break that habit? Because you kind of have to snitch on your friends, and you can't have that mindset about it. You're really trying to save everybody's lives and save the industry from shutting down, but it's so ingrained to us not to confront someone else in another department and say something bad. Like, how do we kind of change that mindset?
That's why, I mean, how do you change your mindset? 30 days to form a habit? Just snitch on somebody every day for 30 days. No, I'm kidding. That's why you have COVID compliance department. That's why they're the bad guy. You can go to them. You can say, I've consistently seen so-and-so not wearing his mask or not wearing it properly or whatever. It concerns me. Fine. They're never going to tell anyone. They're just going to pay attention and call that person out.
Yeah.
Like, I can't tell you how many times I do this. And it's just because people forget, and I get it.
Yeah.
But I'm never going to stop saying it. And, you know, I've had people, even talent, walk in not wearing a mask. And I have no qualms just being like, excuse me, can I get your mask on? We're a safe zone, you know? And they do it. Yes, my eyebrows are up. I'm like, I need you in a mask. Yes, you're talent. We are going to protect you, but you also have to protect us. So, I mean, I think it is a habit. You do have to practice and learn it. But that's also why you have this on-set department to be the bad guy. So utilize them.
Yeah.
See if production will do like a Google number for you to text that everybody can just text it anonymously or something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Like, this is something I saw. So you really do feel like it's anonymous and you're not just pointing fingers at a friend. Yeah. But we all have to, I mean, we have to do it to keep each other safe. There is no other option.
I agree. Snitch on your friends. No, just kidding. Sorry.
It's not snitching. We're not communists. They're not going to jail. They're getting told to wear their mask.
Yeah. I mean,
like, it's really not that big of a deal.
It's not that bad. Yeah.
You know, and sometimes it is more of a big deal. It's like, I know for a fact so-and-so went to a bar this weekend. Okay, that's a bigger deal. However, that's a way bigger deal for everybody's health. Like, we all need to know that and address it.
Yeah.
Make sure that person gets tested. Like, it's not, and I think it's important understanding your production's protocols, that it's not necessarily like an immediately fireable offense, unless, of course, they have COVID and they refuse to inform the production after signing a bunch of documents saying they would let them know. That's where it's like, the line that I've seen is, we agree, we're not signing any waivers, but we are agreeing to follow protocols. And if you blatantly refuse to follow protocols, then that is a fireable offense. And the unions are standing with that like, if they're not respecting the workforce, then, you know, it's terrible behavior. It's not good. It's not professional. But, you know, if somebody's going out on weekends and doing things that put you in danger, they're putting everyone in danger.
Yeah. And I know 479, 479, I'm pretty sure, sent a message to their entire roster, you know, all their members, to say, look, it's not just about what you do at work. It's what you do for the first time ever in our lives. We actually care about what you do after work and on the weekends. Like, you know, if you want to go do this stuff and you're still safe during the week, you do whatever you want. And we've always been good with that. But this has definitely changed that. You know, if you're sitting in a bar, a crowded bar, and you're hanging out in 3 hours there, and there's pictures of you with a live band with a mask off, like, that's going to give somebody some pause, a lot of pause, a big pause, maybe a hard stop. So think about your behavior. I mean,
if you're spending your weekend going to Nashville for a bachelorette party where everyone has COVID and it's just a cesspool of COVID, then we really need to know and, like, quarantine you. Yeah. You know, test you many times. So many, I just throw tests at them. But it's just, there has to be a level of trust at this point, because we're dealing with lives and livelihoods. Like, we could shut down our industry again this year if we don't do things right. And we could also get people killed. We could also have people's, like, lifelong health be altered because we don't know the full effects of what's happening. And I don't take that lightly.
I've had someone say to me, boy, your industry sure does take this seriously. I don't understand how you're different from a pork packing plant. they've figured it out. And I went, no, they didn't. They like
They
killed
got
a ton of
shut
people.
down.
Yeah. And you don't hear about it because it's black and brown people, not like white people in a grocery store. Like, what are you talking about? And they just thought we were being so ridiculous because they don't understand how our business works. And I think that's why it is so important to have all these COVID compliance people, like you said, be in the industry or have a lot of training in the industry, or at least have someone with them that is in a managerial position, because we understand how all of the different departments work. And I was kind of surprised that they thought, well, you're no different than going back to an office building where I've been working through this whole thing, you know, in my office with a mask on. And I'm like, you're so don't understand how movies get made, you know? And I don't think people understand that we are, right now we're trying to keep it under 50 people, obviously, but we're 50, 100, 200, 500 people that are all housed in one building, in one room, having close contact with one another because we all interdepartmentally need to interact to do our jobs. We all touch a lot of the same things. I mean, we're touching paperwork, not anymore. We're going more and more digital, but we touch paperwork and stuff. And people just don't see, you know, people outside of our industry don't seem to understand how big of a deal it is and why we're taking this so seriously. It's not that we're all liberal Democrats afraid of a bug, you know,
Well,
it's that this shit is real.
Well, they also don't understand freelance life and the fact that our livelihood literally depends on us staying well and able to work. And not just my livelihood depends on you, it depends on you and 49 other people so that I can continue to make money.
And going from job to job to job to job to job.
Right.
We're all traveling all over the country, going from here today, there next week, there over here. So we're intermixing all of these different, you know, corporate pods with one another, you know?
Yeah. It's just, we don't have the safety of salaries, you know? We are constantly saying yes to everything possible to see what hits and what we can make money on. And yeah, I'm working with different people every job based on what the job needs. And those people are working on different, you know, like the contact tracing alone is what gives me heartburn. Like, it's just, which is why I'm such a proponent of testing as much as possible, both individually and with a production, because you don't know what you don't know. And if it's available, then I'm going to take advantage of it because I want to keep working. And I want to also, me working allows me to hire other people and get them work. And that's very important to me. And I want that to be done safely. And that means that I have to be safe and they need to be safe. And, you know, I've got pictures of every single COVID test I've ever taken. All like, I think we're up to 17 now. It's a lot. I know.
By the way, I've heard that if you do a little bit of this, kind of like a little squeeze and a little twist, that helps the pain.
Oh,
and
I'll try that next time. Definitely. It's not pain. It's like a
the
trigger.
tickle. Yeah.
It's the tickle. I sneeze so hard and I try to just always make sure, pull it out before you sneeze so you don't die and poke your own brain. And on that, I'm done.
One last thing about the testing, because I think it was Birdsong that I saw, Chris Birdsong, who's a key grip for features in TV, although he's done some commercials, but he said that when he was like, I can lean back in my chair and I've got something here. So when they go up, I'm rested on something. But he said he did one where he didn't have a backstop. And as they pushed, he kept moving back. So they kept going higher and higher. And it was one of the most painful tests he had had. Do you have any insight on something like that? Like, is it helpful to have a backstop or have you done it both ways?
I've never tried with a backstop. So maybe I'll try that next time. My only insight is it'll clear your sinuses.
Well, thank you for your time and your knowledge and your expertise. I did these 5 free panels, auditioning, now I remember them, auditioning, acting, crew, testing, and remote post for Atlanta Film Society, and made them free because to me, again, putting public health behind a paywall just didn't feel right. And I knew that Georgia is open and New York and LA maybe aren't open as much. And I wanted, you know, one, I'm really proud of what we've done here and able to hopefully lead the industry in getting back to work. And I'm really excited that everybody is so willing to share. Like, people are learning things and they're sharing it with other people. And a lot of people, you know, behind the scenes are having these Zoom conversations, ADs, line producers. You know I'm on a commercial list. I think you're on it too, where everybody is sharing information that they're learning along the way. And it's just been really nice to see people who, you know, I mean, yeah, we, you know, when we're all working, we kind of competed against each other for jobs, but we've always passed jobs around because we understand that, like, this is how it works. We're helpful to one another. We're competition, but we're not. And it's really nice to see so many people come together and share with one another. Nobody's holding information. Nobody wants to hold anything. And I love
incredibly collaborative, for sure.
Well, thank you again. Thank you, everybody, for joining us today. I hope you check out more things. We've got drive-in movies at 3 locations. We have got a complete virtual catalog of movies and also of the Creative Conference. If you live out of state, you can still buy a pass or individual tickets. Some of the features that are online you may not be able to access because they have premiere rights, or, you know, they can't be shown outside of Georgia. So you may not be able to access all the content, but the Creative Conference is there for everyone. Passes are super cheap. It's $50. We've got over 30 panels covering showrunning, producers, directors, writers, development people. We just added one for stunts, which I'm really excited about. So there's a lot of great content out there. I hope you check more of it out. Thank you again to Gabrielle Pickle, or Gabby, or G, for sharing her knowledge with us. You have a great rest of your day. Stay safe out there. And I will shoot you an email about those really cool masks I read about.
Yeah, I would love that.
Yeah, and I want to say it's the COVID and the Crew panel. Trisha Solin, who is a indie cinematographer and also Union AC, was telling us about that. So I'll shoot that so you have it. But everybody else can just watch that one, learn more. And she actually holds up the mask and puts it on so you can see everything. So thanks, everybody. And thanks again, Gabby. Y'all have a good week. Bye.